All right, let me change color again, and in this case I want to go to existentialism. And I think it's appropriate for existentialism that we use black. All right, existentialists on their metaphysics, complicated. One of the ways in which they're complicated is most of the existentialists will argue that there is no such thing as an absolute truth, a right answer to whether the universe is ultimately naturalistic, right, or not. Most of the major existentialists, I think it is true to say, are non-religious, right? They will take God's being dead to be a central truth, right, about the universe that we have to advocate, but they won't advocate that dogmatically. And they will also, most of the non-religious existentialists recognize that there is a significant minority tradition of thinkers who are existentialists who are religious in their orientation. And so there's a range of positions that are possible, right, for the existentialists. The existentialists epistemologically will argue that traditional faith is illegitimate, kind of that unthinking acceptance of whatever one's parents taught you or whatever you hear in church. That's an inauthentic position for one to take epistemologically. At the same time, they are skeptical about reason, and they don't believe that reason's claims, say through science, to figure out the ultimate truths about the universe, also are legitimate. And so what they will argue is that there is a kind of non-rational commitment that is built into any sort of commitments, belief-wise or cognitive-wise, that one makes. So what I'm going to do, and this is an interpretive move here, is say that the existentialists are an advocate of a kind of faith. They don't think that traditional religion or science can tell us, right, what the right thing to believe is, or that through reason we can figure out what the truths are, but ultimately there is some sort of a non-rational commitment that goes on in forming anyone's belief system, and I think that's closer to a faith position, however non-standard. And their views on human nature, again, the existentialists are a little bit complicated. One of the more provocative claims that at least one of the major existentialists has made is to say that there is no such thing, right, as human nature. That may sound like an absurd claim, and one can interpret it in a number of ways. But at least then on one line, existentialist-wise, one can say that, again, this is not a legitimate, there is no such branch, right, of philosophical inquiry, that the human being is radically tabula rasa, and what one becomes as a human being then is totally a matter of choices or various other factors, right, that one makes. Again, here, though, I'm going to make a slight interpretive move. I'm going to put the existentialists, for the most part, over here, because I do think there is a kind of lurking dualism in most of existentialism. We'll talk about this issue more when we explore them. The idea being that whatever value commitments one comes to have, or whatever one comes to take the meaning of one's life to be, that being very important to what your human identity is, that has nothing to do with any sort of physicalistic or biological or natural facts about oneself or the world. So there's a kind of duality between whatever we are given naturalistically and what we come to believe psychologically, and I think that tilts the existentialists in a more dualistic direction here. When we come to the ethics, again, existentialism is complicated. One of the things that is foundational to most existentialists in their ethics is that there is no right answer that is handed to us by religion, that science can't provide us right answers about the important questions of how we're supposed to live and what the meanings of our lives are. So we can, again, put an X over here and say, you know, there is no such thing as the right answer to these ethics issues here. And then we can add the qualification that despite that being, say, the official position that one would take as an existentialist, if you look at the beliefs that the actual major existentialist writers advocate, most of them tend fairly strongly toward, I'll put this in again, a dotted box, toward a kind of altruism, and many of them also will include some egoistic finding significance for your life as an individual, right, in the world, approaches as well. But I think the center of gravity tends more in a communal and altruistic direction for the existentialists. All right, let's turn now to Marxism as the sixth one on our list, and the natural color here to use is red. All right, Marxists, metaphysically, militantly naturalistic, perhaps even more so than the behaviorists. In their view, there is no spiritual world, there is no supernatural world. That metaphysics is not just wrong, but it's also dangerous and destructive. Hence the militant adjective that I used here. On their views on human nature, there's an interesting set of possibilities here. On one respect, the Marxists will argue that human beings are, by their human nature, conditioned by their environmental circumstances. So to the extent that one believes that human beings are simply conditioned to believe what they believe, then one ends up in a kind of epistemological skepticism that one is not believing on a basis of personal faith commitment, nor on the basis of a reasoning through of various positions. But in terms of its self-description, Marxism advocates a kind of reason, arguing that we can study nature scientifically, empirically, that we can gather historical data and put a proper historical interpretation on where things have come. And the self-description label that the Marxists will use is a scientific approach to socialism, the science part capturing their take on the epistemology, which is a kind of reason-based here. In their view of human nature, I did mention the environmental determinism. Like the behaviorists, the Marxists are usually fairly strongly reductive materialists, arguing that humans do have a biological package that they're born with, but nonetheless it's extraordinarily plastic, and it can be shaped by physical, environmental circumstances, and in the Marxist case, particularly economic circumstances that people find themselves in. When we turn to the ethics issue, I want to put the Marxists in two positions here. One is the Marxists spend a great deal of time, obviously advocating not just a philosophical position, but a certain political view, and they see all of their philosophy as supporting their political view or as an outgrowth of a foundational political group. Position, but what they're doing in advocating their philosophy, their politics rather, and the philosophies behind it, and critiquing other politics and philosophy, is a great deal of time critiquing what they take to be predatory philosophies, predatory economic and political systems. So I'm going to use this dotted line over here, arguing that in their analysis, descriptively, when they're doing descriptive ethics, much of their history is to say that the organization of society has historically tended in one way, shape, or form toward various forms of predatory ethics. But in their own advocacy, the kind of ethics that they believe is the right kind of ethics that would be in place once their political system is put in place. They have a strongly communal, communitarian, hence communistic, and altruistic, selfless, and so forth, all of that vocabulary built into their ethics.